What's going on YouTube? We are back, and this is the second installment of the Vegas trip. If you haven't already seen part one, go back, watch that, like and comment on the hands. Also subscribe to the channel if you're not already, of course. And we are going to get into part two. This session is going to detail my session at the Bellagio, which was pretty much my favorite place that I was at, and I ran the hottest. So, not going to spoil too much, just go ahead, enjoy, like, comment, and subscribe on this video, and let's just get right to it. So when I was walking into the Bellagio, I was greeted with this very large open room full of Asian culture. It was very beautiful to see. A lot of people were taking pictures, stopping by, just admiring the work. It was quite the sight. So I didn't think I was going to see this, but it made me think that Bellagio is definitely one of the nicer hotels. So now as we're walking into the poker room, we had to stop and just take a video of the Legends room. When you go in there, it's a few tables. It's not all that great, just the room itself. But when you see the portrait on the walls, and then you see like the photos of all of the legends that have graced poker, from Doyle Brunson, rest in peace, to Phil Ivey and so many others, it really just kind of puts in perspective why you love poker and why we fell in love and why we play to this day. So it made me enthusiastic. So I go and get my chips, and now we are seated and we are ready to battle. So you're gonna have to excuse me because at the beautiful Bellagio, I didn't start recording this hand, but the action when it's followed pre-flop, I raised to 15. The next act player calls, and then it gets to the small blind and he decides to call as well. So we went 3 ways to a flop, and the flop was Queen, Jack, 9. So with King 10, we flopped the absolute nuts, but there is a flush draw on the board. And being monkey in the middle is never fun, but with the nuts, it's a lot more fun. And weirdly enough, the small ball player decides to donk out for $15. I'm not going to slow play. There's a flush draw out there, and there's a lot of cards I could either give somebody else a better hand, being a heart, or it could give somebody else a chance to get away, like with an action killing card, such as if a king or a 10 comes, it's going to put a 4-liner out there, and I won't get as much value. So I raised it up to $45, and what I didn't expect was for the player behind me to put in the call. However, he could have a flush draw himself and doesn't want to just give up without seeing at least a turn card, and he decides to call, and the small blind player who donked decides to fold. So not quite what I thought was going to happen, but once again I have the nuts. So I'm just looking for a turn card that is pretty clean, and we see a clean one in the 5 of diamonds. So with that, I'm trying to think about what sizing I should choose. So there was $45 put in pre-flop, and then there was $90 put in on the turn. So I could be going a little bit larger, but the stacks are getting pretty shallow. So I bet out for $75, just trying to get our opponent to continue. And he does one better and rips it all in. And I slightly have him covered. And of course we snap call, and the river is clean, and we still retain the nuts. But as you see, he had pocket queens and he flopped top set. But the thing is when I raised to $15 pre-flop, if he would have 3-bet me, I would have folded with King 10 offsuit, and he would have won the pot and wouldn't have gotten stacked. So once again, I'm glad that it happened like that. But as you see, players in Vegas are playing pretty tight. But once again, it is to our advantage. We flop the nuts and we stack him, and we start off the hand very, very well. And now we already have a double up. So let's try to keep this momentum going into these very next hands. So this hand kind of played itself, but we raised to $15, and the next player, he raises it up to $40. And of course, with the pocket rockets, I'm trying to decide on what sizing. And because there's no cold callers to the 40, one thing you need to do exploitatively, especially with a hand like aces or kings that need little to no protection, is to not raise like to an incredible amount to where somebody is semi-bluffing or has like a mediocre hand, such as like pocket 9s or pocket 10s. They're incentivized to fold. So I decided to just go with 2.5x to $100, and he immediately just jams on me. And of course with pocket aces, we snap call. He tells me that he has ace king, so he's drawing extremely thin. I have aces. You see the run out is very clean. He doesn't hit a king, doesn't hit a straight. And once again, we are stacking another opponent, and we are running scorching hot in Vegas. Let's try to see if we can keep that momentum going. All right, so we're gonna go over one app hand. We are sitting here with ace-5 of spades on the button. There's a cutoff raise to $12, and I could be putting a 3-bet here. However, I just decided to call. Both are fine. And we are off heads up to a flop of King 10 deuce with all spades. So we flop the nuts all together. Let's go. So he checks. And I decided to put out a small bet of $11. And he raises almost 6x to $64. So I'm loving it. I just flat called one time to see what he does on the turn. The turn is a clean 6. And now he decides to bet out for $160. So he's pretty much betting a little bit over pot here. So at this point, I feel like he's committed. He must have a very strong hand that's vulnerable. So I decided to just rip it all in for 383 total, 220 on top of his bet. And he calls, so we want to see what he has. And he has bottom set of deuces. So we're only fading 10 out, 20% to a board pairing on the river. And he runs it once on me, and boom, the river is a king. He rivers a full house, and we lose a pretty significant pot. I was only into the game for 200 at this point in time, so I'm only losing 200 of my own dollars. But nonetheless, I was in for 400 in this hand, so it all hurts, and it is what it is. But once again, if you want to get some action on the app, just let me know. Information in the description. I can get you into the game. But let's get back to the Vegas hands. So obviously the run good couldn't last forever. So there was a bunch of limps pre-flop, and I just limped in as well. Not really recommended. With a hand like 7-9 suited, I can raise on the button to so much passiveness. But I just decided to call the $3. So we went 5 ways to a flop, and we see a pretty beautiful flop. It is ace, 10, 8 with 2 diamonds. So we are open-ended with a straight and flush draw. And one player decides to bet out for $10. The player immediately to my right calls, and I call as well. So we are now going 3 ways to a turn, which is a jack, giving us the straight. We do not have the nuts, though. King Queen is a gut shot and would be the absolute nuts. And so now when it checks to me, I bet out for $30. And it folds out everyone else besides the player to my right. And we are off to probably the worst river card. It is the Queen of Hearts. And now any king makes the higher straight. And now what is even worse is the player to my right decides to donk into me on this river card for $60. So that is close to pot. And these spots are pretty much under bluffed. The reason why I hate this spot so much is just because I have the worst hand to call with. I am blocking a straight and I am blocking diamonds. So the chance of him having missed diamonds is very low. And even if he did have some type of combo draw with diamonds, it would have backed into a straight more than likely with the king. So this spot is so under bluff that I think about it for quite a while. I really am torn about what to do, but I just come to the conclusion that this is such a bluff, like so infrequently, that it's probably more profitable for me to just fold in this case. And that is what I do. And the player decides to show us his hand, and he had 10-4 of diamonds, so he did have missed diamonds and only had a pair. He turned into a bluff on the river, and kudos to him. And I know you're going to tell me that I probably should have called with a straight here, but I just feel like this spot is so under bluff that probably folding is the best way. And like I said, with my combo of hand, I just feel like I'm blocking everything, and he's not likely to be bluffing here, but he was, so I take my head off to him. I got bluffed, and we're moving on. In this hand, we raised pre-flop to $15 with King 3 of spades. I'm in the +1, so obviously it's a very light raise. Next act decides to call, and so does the big blind. So we are off to the flop, which is 9 deuce 4 with 2 hearts, 1 spade. So I decide to check, and it checks all the way around, and we see the 2 of spades. And so now that I have a flush draw with an overcard, I decide to bet out for $25. And the big blind decides to call, and the river is a 6. So I don't think he's that strong. He didn't raise the turn. So I missed. I'm sitting here with king high. So obviously if I check, I know I'm going to lose. So I put out a bet of $45. I don't want to bet too much because if he's going to call, he would call 60. So I think that $45 is a price where he'll still fold, and it also saves me money on a more expensive bluff. And he thinks about it for a little bit, and he decides to fold. So we're happy with that result. Do you like my bluff sizing on the river, or would you have went larger, or would you have went less? Or would you just gave up as played and just checked back with king high? Let me know in the comments. And we are moving on to the last hand of the Bellagio session.
So in this final hand, we have the beautiful King Jack of Spades in the cutoff. There is a middle position raised to $10. Now I definitely could be three betting here, but this player, he's only raised really strong hands such as Ace King, Kings, Aces, you know the type of guy. OMC as they say. And we are off three ways because the player in the button decides to call and we see a flop of King 10-3. The pre-flop raiser decides to bet out for $15. Of course, I'm not going to fold top pair, especially because I have backdoor straight draws as well. So I call and the small blind calls as well, and we see the 8 of spades on the turn. And now when he checks, I'm going to put out a bet here. I'm putting out a bet of $35. If somebody has a better hand, they're going to raise and let me know. And then I'll just fold here. But they both decide to fold. So I play a couple hands, nothing really eventful. And this is going to conclude the Bellagio session along with the Vegas session. So we're going to go to the outro where we tally up everything that happened over the course of the trip and see how we did.
All right, so as you see, back on the East Coast, we are going to go over the numbers for the Vegas trip. So, in the first session at the Aria, we had a profit of $750. At the MGM Grand, remember we only bought in for $125, but we caught a profit of $250 in that session. So for the money that I put in, that's pretty good. And for the Bellagio, we had a profit of $600. So when you tally up those three sessions, the grand total profit from poker was $600. Mind you, this was just in a 2-day span. And in the time I did play blackjack, I didn't get no footage of blackjack yet, but I am going to start working with some of these casinos to start filming blackjack. So if you want to see that, just leave a comment below that you want blackjack content. But for this session, we won another $950 playing blackjack. So for the 2-day trip, we won a total of $25.50 all together. That was a very good little session. I get semi-comped by MGM because I play there, so the trip wasn't too expensive, but nonetheless, I appreciate all y'all for watching. This was amazing. Got another Vegas trip planned very, very soon. Make sure you comment and subscribe if you're not already. Until the next video, holla.